Hello, hello, once again, my beauties and bees. Welcome to another installment of Cryptic Corner, where we explore the entities of the unexplained, supernatural, paranormal, and hidden, the mysterious, the alien, the accursed, and the forbidden. I'm your host, Miss Bumble Bree, and today is brought to you by the I guess I want to say the Canadian Mounties. I don't know. What is today brought to us by? We are talking about, we've covered other entities similar to this. A lot of the shapeshifters of different Native American groups and, of course, European werewolves and things go kind of linked together with tonight's topic, but it is different. It is unique because, whereas Yinalushi, the Navajo skinwalkers, they are sorcerers, right? The werewolves of European lore, a lot of times, at least in the traditional works, they were sorcerers with magic belts and stuff. So these are people that seek out the dark arts and pursue that to its inevitable end. Today's creature, though, today's shapeshifter, I guess you could call him, does not follow that mold because generally speaking, the curses and abilities of the Wendigo were thrust upon the person who is possessed of the Wendigo spirit, right? Due to some horrific act of cannibalism. Now, there are a few Wendigo cases that I'm familiar with, including legal cases. I did make sure to find a video that covers that, because I like to talk about Jack Fiddler, because he's the quintessential moving from, or saying our ways as Europeans are superior to the ways of the native peoples. Which, do what you want with that. I don't know how to tell you. I have. We'll get to it when we get to the Jack Fiddler story. But I'm going to start off. Oh, hey, look, it's me. I need to switch that. That shouldn't be that screen. It should be. Yeah, it should be that one. So we're doing one of these cheesy top 5 channels. Top 5 scary videos elite. Yeah, and this channel, it's basic. It's got a lot of subscribers though, 93K. So if you should do your part to help me pass up this channel. I'm right behind them. I got 1.29K, and they've got 93.3K. So it's basically we're basically neck and neck. But you can help by subscribing to my channel and making things. No, I'm just messing. I know people like these kind of channels better. People like channels that present this stuff as real, as opposed to channels who set out to debunk it. But just to be clear, though, this is a long-ass video. It's got this longer than what we usually cover on Cryptic Corner. I don't know. It's actually multiple videos stitched together, though, so it might have some duplicates, and if it does, we'll probably bounce around a little bit. I got about, well, you saw where I was on it before I decided it's the one I wanted to cover. But usually I do about a 20-ish minute video. This one's 52 minutes. So this might be a long-ass Cryptic Corner, but if you like that, stick around, because we are going to do the long haul. Yeah, and I'll see if people enjoy that on the premiere too. Oh, hey, Thomas. Thomas and John showed up. Thomas from Wild World. Your new stuff has been pretty good. Still waiting for that saltwater crocodile range, but I requested saltwater crocodile range video because I love the idea of seeing how far out in the Pacific these sightings go. If you need help with researching that, hit me up. All right. And yeah, John, are you out here being silly? Okay. Al Trucker's in the house. Hello, and Navi. Oh, we're filling up. Everybody's filing in. Dr. Kip is here. What? Good morning, Dr. Kip. All right. Who's ready to Wendigo it up? These videos literally jumps right into it, right? It's like, boom, number 5. Okay, but there's not just 5, because this one ends here, and then it switches guys. It like goes from that guy to this guy. So, let's go!
Coming in at number 5, we've got Jack Fiddler, Wendigo Hunter. And we'll kick this one off with not 1, not 2, but 14 purported Wendigo sightings. Possibly more if Jack wasn't able to get them before his untimely death. Back.
Thomas, obviously, hopefully it's obvious that I'm just teasing you. But Thomas has put out some great videos in the last couple of weeks that's boom, boom, back to back. So I might plug those later on Breeze Bestiary after I do the Gila Monster section.
In the day, there was a man who claimed to be able to kill Wendigos. This man was known as Zauno Hishigo Galbo, but European settlers just knew him as Jack Fiddler. He lived in what's now known as the Sandy Lake First Nation and was a well-respected healer. He would go from community to community, ensuring the health of many people, but often he was sought out for more macabre business, fighting cannibalistic creatures. Jack would euthanize anyone who felt that the curse of the Wendigo was upon them. They sought him out to end their lives before they caused any trouble for their loved ones in their communities. Potions and ceremonies would mitigate damage, but death was the only surefire way to end a Wendigo's curse. And even then, it's a little tricky to deal with. So Jack would go from place to place, ensuring that Wendigos truly found their final resting place.
Just to be clear, through a modern lens, I mean, I don't know the full extent of the mental illness associated with Wendigo sightings, right? I don't know for sure. But this seems like a precursor to death with dignity for people suffering from mental illness who thought that they were a burden on their families. Yeah. But the Mounties thought he was a murderer.
Euthanizing the cursed individual, he would also perform a ritual cremation and burial to seal it away for good. Tales of his exploits eventually reached the Mounties, though, who did not seem to think what Jack was doing was community service. After some investigation, they found out about a woman who was thought to be possessed. She was choked to death by her father-in-law and his brother. Any guesses as to who the brother was? Jack Fiddler. So the Fuzz arrested the men, claiming that what the law forbids, no pagan belief can justify. Jack eventually managed to slip away from the police before his trial and killed himself to avoid the long arm of the law. 14 counts of murder is a tough sentence, especially when assisted suicide and demon hunting were not considered valid defenses. Coming in at number 4, we got the
the irony of a country that's built on Christian foundations deciding that somebody else executing someone for what do you call it? Religious crimes, I guess, for something along those lines, for possession, for making sweet love to the devil or whatever, because just, and maybe not Canada so much. Were there any Canadian witch trials? I don't know if there were or not. Let me see. Canadian witch trials. While Canada's history includes instances where people were accused of witchcraft, especially in the 17th and 18th century, there were no widespread witch trials in the same vein as the Salem witch trials in the colonial America. Okay. Early accusations in New France. Yeah, 1661. Danielle Vieux was arrested and charged with practicing sorcery against a servant girl. So these, and you had Anne Lemoc, a tavern keeper in 1680s Montreal, was accused of witchcraft, adultery, and suspected infanticide. So, I mean, they were execute they were able to. They were saying, yeah, we can execute people for religious reasons on our end, but if you do it on your end, we're gonna execute you.
It goes of Blackwood Mountain. Boom. butterfly effect. This pod of people eaters comes from the choose your own horrific adventure game Until Dawn, featuring a pre-Bohemian Rhapsody Rami Malek. In this game, you make decisions that will end up sealing the fate of 8 unlucky vacationers. See, this group of pals decided to return to Blackwood Mountain a year after a tragic disappearance. They brought some friends up and pulled a nasty prank, resulting in one running off into the night, with the people and becoming a depraved monster in order to live. I'd take the long nap, to be honest. Coming in at number 3, we've got a deep. The remaining miners became Wendigo. Known is that the area had been frequented by Wendigos for centuries. European miners came to the area back in the 1800s and were warned off by natives who claimed the mountain was sacred. As settlers tend to do, they ignored this advice and started excavating anyways. In doing so, they released the Wendigo spirits. Later on, in the mid-1900s, a group of miners came back for some of those sweet, sweet minerals. They fell victim to some unfortunate accidents, though, and found themselves trapped in the mine shafts, forced to cannibalize.
Say it was clustered around Massachusetts colonies because that's where the religious motherfuckers were. I call them religious motherfuckers because I am descendant. Yeah, I mean, but there were, all the colonies had, you know, to some degree, some ingrained European religious zealotry, right? Just a variation in degree. The further south you went, the more Catholic it got, right? The more north you went, the more Protestant it got. But the east coast of the New World was very, very religious, very European religious. Why does this Wendigo have a butterfly tattoo on its forearm or its upper arm? Like where I have this, Wendigo has a butterfly. We should switch because the Hellcat I got on my arm or my shoulder would look better on you, and that butterfly would look better on me.
As to survive, the remaining miners became Wendigos. After a powerful Wendigo was killed, its spirit was transferred to the unfortunate friend who ran off into the night. And you guessed it, this unfortunate individual came back with a vengeance. One by one, depending on how you play it, people fall victim to the Wendigo of Blackwood Mountain.
I didn't know you had a butterfly tattoo, my girl.
Sometimes becoming terrible creatures themselves. So next time you're in a survival situation, ask yourself if it's worth eating people and becoming a depraved monster in order to live. I'd take the long nap, to be honest. Coming in at number 3.
So, let's be clear here. There are a lot of people who would trade in, their humanity for superpowers, for the super strength and savagery and stealth and all these mystical powers that come from being a Wendigo. There are so many people that would trade their humanity in for that. It's not even a question. People are sick for the most part and just want power. I'm sorry, I'm being a freaking doomer, but yeah. Not Wendigos. Witches and witch trials is what I meant. Seems more of a New England deal. Was the Wendigo getting a prostate exam, Al? Dogs are frozen with fear when a butterfly lands on their nose. Yeah.
We've got a deep woods discovery. There's nothing quite like having your expectations subverted, yeah? I don't want to spoil too much of this story before I tell it, so here we go. I found this one in green text format, and it seemed...
I'm not all that off put by cannibalism. I'm not like, oh, I'd eat a person, but what I'm saying is that ritual cannibalism has been part of the human experience since for tens of thousands of years. We'll just say that. Maybe hundreds of thousands of years would probably be a better explanation. The problem with cannibalism in general is prions, right? I mean, obviously, if it's going to make you deteriorate physically and mentally, then you ought not do it. But as far as like cannibalism and ritualistic cannibalism as part of a culture, I'm really indifferent to it. Because at that point it's consensual and expected in the culture, which I have no problem with. I imagine that, when the European folk got to these different, and it's not just, you know, the Caribbeans, the Caribs, who are actually, you know, where we get words like barbecue, which barbecue was initially a method of cooking human flesh. So do with that what you will. But yeah, there was we covered Roanoke a couple of weeks back, and there was cannibalism there because people were getting desperate and starving. You know, of course, you got the Donner Party, the soccer team that got stuck in the mountains. Cannibalism.
Seems to be coming from a person living in a rural area. Every year, they find that hiking in the wooded area near their home is quite pleasant in the fall, so they head out to do just that. However, they seem to find some
Bugbot's still going on about water horses. We'll fix
the
that.
more overgrown areas unsettling. Makes sense, especially if you're far away from society at large. As they explore a little more, they notice something dive into the bushes, giving them a start. At that point, the hiker has had enough and decides to book it. There's something nearby though, and it seems to be following quite closely. Eventually, the hiker makes it to the end of the trail and realizes that they have to go back where they came from. After the experience they had, they're not looking forward to it. In the end, they do indeed buck up and head back to the top of the trail. When they get to the part where they saw something dive into the bushes, they realize that it wasn't a monster or anything sinister, but in fact a little girl. She calls out for
Oh yeah, I got like lots of little fact nuggets. Stick around. I drop them all the time. My brain's full of a lot of trivial knowledge. It's actually that's all that's in there is trivial knowledge. That's why I do this, because this is like depressurizing. This is like turning the knob to let the steam out of the pressure cooker. Is every Saturday I do this show so I can depressurize my brain from all these useless facts that are in there.
Help, but as the hiker gets closer, a strange feeling washes over him. It looks like the girl is hurt and can't walk on her own, but when the hiker gets close enough for the little girl to see him, she begins screaming bloody murder. Oh no. It's at this point that the hiker gives up all pretenses and eats the girl, taking her form. Bet you didn't see that one coming. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Moose Man. Let's take a quick trip to Alberta, except instead of seeing the mountains...
See, Al, they're going to talk about you right now. Al Trucker, the Moose Man.
Or hockey, we'll go looking for shape-shifting terrors. Hooray! There were tales circulating around for a while about some sort of centaur with moose features instead of horse ones, although many claim these to be patently false. That's not going to stop me from talking about it as if it were real though. This thing lived by the river and never got too close to human settlements. However, it would often kill and mutilate game animals to make them unusable. In fact, it's also said to have been involved in the killing and maiming of many men as well. Beyond the moose-centaur comparison, there isn't much to be said about the way this creature looks.
A centaur moose is fucking lit. I swear that is lit. That is the coolest cryptid. Like in my head, visualizing, like the only thing that I can think of that's cooler than a moose centaur would maybe be like a rhinoceros centaur. A moose centaur, or not centaur, but minotaur. But it wouldn't be a minotaur. It'd be a Minocervus, I guess. Like not service, but like as in cervid. Like the deer family. Yeah. A centaur moose would be cool too, don't get me wrong. Centaur moose could be actually kind of sexy. Well, a minotaur moose wouldn't be that sexy, but a centaur moose could be sexy. A Canadian with like yeah. Anyway, whew, get myself worked up thinking about a centaur moose now.
It's huge, as all moose tend to be, and walks around with flesh hanging from its antlers. Like many creatures in the same vein, it reeks of something otherworldly and tends to make hideous noises when encountered. Whether the moose look is its only avatar or one of many forms, we may never know. And finally, at number 1...
Okay. And the flesh dripping from the antlers and stuff, that's like, that's how antlers are shed. The velvet comes off of them. Not on moose though. Moose, they shed their whole antlers. So maybe somebody saw like a caribou shedding its velvet off of its antlers, and had never seen that before. It's like, oh my God, it's a monster. Because it does look freaky when they do it.
Got the Roadrunner. Meep meep indeed. While walking his dog at around 10 p.m., our storyteller came across a couple dead rabbits accompanied by a horrid stench. Assuming it was just a fox or something, he moved right along. Soon after, his dog started acting super weird though. It wouldn't move at all and seemed to be staring at something off in the distance, eyes wide. Then the smell came back. This time he couldn't.
I really hope this music doesn't become a problem that's playing here, because that's going to be... If I have to demonetize this whole freaking segment here with this song playing in the background, I'm going to be pissed. But it sounds like it's maybe royalty-free music, but...
Couldn't quite place where it was coming from, but he'd heard enough stories about bad smells and evil vibes in the woods to know to be careful. He took his dog and got off the path, hiding in some tall grass to the side. That's when he saw it. Something almost indescribable. Gray skin, rotten flesh, a horrible, emaciated horse's head, limbs that only seemed to half work. It made him want to run away at full speed immediately, but...
That's a bit of a stretch to say moose are almost as big as elephants. Elephants, the biggest elephants ever recorded, approach like a 13-foot height at the shoulders. That's, what's it? That's like 4.2 meters. So, right around 4 meters. So, a moose is probably, with their antlers, right around, the max height would probably be under 3 meters, but they are huge. I mean, let's not downplay that. They are absolutely monstrous animals. They're the biggest members of the deer family. Even the extinct megaloceros, the Irish elk or Irish giant deer of the Pleistocene, was not bigger than a moose physically. It had bigger antlers, but it was not. It and the moose are roughly the same proportions. The megaloceros just had massive antlers. That's the difference. Imagine being a 9-year-old Sioux running into one alone in the woods of Vermont. I'm Floridian. Oh my God, give me a gator any day. Moose are fucking wild looking, right? Yeah. And they're like semi-aquatic. Like one of the moose's predators is an orca, because they swim in the sea and eat seagrasses and stuff.
That was a bad call with it so close by. Sneaking seemed to be the better choice. The man and his dog started creeping away and got about 50 feet. The creature was out of sight now, and the man thought he could start running. But apparently the Roadrunner knew exactly where he was trying to sneak away to and was immediately on his tail. Thankfully, the sneaking gave this man and his dog a bit of a head start, and they were off to the races. As they ran from this awful beast, the man could hear it breathing. It sounded like an overexcited child, happy to be running in the woods in search of something good. Thankfully, getting back to the jagged gravel path proved to be a challenge for the Roadrunner. Whatever was wrong with its limbs made it difficult to traverse the rocky terrain, and eventually it gave up, screaming all the while. The man hasn't seen the creature again, but that's no guarantee that it's not around. Shapeshifting isn't uncommon with these kinds of things.
Number 5, the literal legend.
So the Wendigo. We just jump right into another list here.
The story has some variation between tribes, but most of the general details are the same. My research has shown that some tribes believe that the very first Wendigo was a warrior who made a deal with an evil spirit in exchange for the skills, strength, and stature to defeat his foes and save his tribe. He was transformed into the Wendigo, and after the battle was banished by his people. Wendigo is a malevolent spirit who possesses...
What scares me is how giant moose can go through a forest too thick for any person and not make a noise, right? With their giant, they have this, 8-foot antler span, and they're like just like moving gracefully through a thick forest. It's wild.
People, with some versions of the tale having this be a result of a person's greed, and others having a more disturbing cause. A common version of the legend is that when people are caught...
Callback, Antjer, our moose Canadian kelpies. We covered kelpies last week, and that will be on Cryptic Corner Fridays here coming up soon. But if you can't wait, it's last week's Cryptic Corner, and you can go back and watch that, definitely. But Yeah, I think a moose would probably thrash you, like a kelpie.
In times of famine or in extreme survival situations, they sometimes have to resort to eating human flesh in order to survive. This resulted in them transforming into a Wendigo, who would have an intense craving for human flesh that could never be satiated, no matter how much they consumed. Some tribes describe the Wendigo as a creature who grows with every person they eat, so that they can never be full, making them simultaneously starving and gluttonous. In his book, The Manitus, The Spiritual World of the Ojibwe, First Nations teacher and scholar...
That is an important factor of the Wendigo lore. They're never sated. They are always hungry and starving, and a lot of times they'll depict them as emaciated because it demonstrates that factor. But sometimes it's just a spiritual glut, right? And they don't look especially emaciated. But am I saying that right? Emaciated, famished, starving, skin and bones.
Basil H. Johnston gives the following physical description of the creature. The Wendigo was gaunt to the point of emaciation, its desiccated skin pulled tightly over its bones. With its bones pushing out against its skin, its complexion the ash gray of death, and its eyes pushed back deep into their sockets. The Wendigo looked like a gaunt skeleton recently disinterred from the grave. What lips it had were tattered and bloody, unclean and suffering from the suppuration of the flesh. The Wendigo gave off a strange and eerie odor of decay and decomposition, of death and corruption. Wendigo's level of cunning in speech vary from version to version, with some tales having him imitate the voice of a loved one in order to coax their victims closer.
That is very Skinwalker-esque, to imitate the voices of loved ones. That is a lot of the folklore around Skinwalkers in general, but also, of course, part of the lore for Wendigos. So, I mean, these are the correlations that I was talking about at the beginning, with different types of folklore overlapping to build a broader understanding of the human mind in relation to these topics.
A particularly
we're not getting through this video, by the way. We're 8.5 minutes in of a 52-minute video, and we've been going for Cryptic Corner for a whole half an hour now. We're not getting through the whole thing. But I am going to speed it up so we can get through more of it. Hopefully it's not too fast to understand.
Disturbing folk story that was part of a compilation of tales assembled by a scholar named Lottie Marsden in Ojibwe Myths and Tales Archaeological Report of the Canadian Institute goes as follows. One time, long ago, a big Wendigo stole a boy. But the boy was too thin, so the Wendigo didn't eat him up right away. But he traveled with the boy, waiting for him to get fat. The Wendigo had a knife and he'd cut the boy on the hand to see if he was fat enough to eat. But the boy didn't get fat. They traveled too much. One day they came to a village and the Wendigo sent the boy to the village to get some things for him to eat. He just gave the boy so much time to go there and back. The boy told the tribe that the Wendigo was near them and showed them his hand where the Wendigo cut him to see if he was fat enough to eat. They heard the Wendigo calling the boy. He said to the boy, "Hurry up, don't tell lies to those people." The tribe went to where the Wendigo was and cut off his legs. They went back again to see if he was dead. He wasn't. He was eating the marrow from inside of the bones of his legs that were cut off. The tribe asked the Wendigo if there was any fat on them. He said, "You bet there is. I've eaten lots of you. No wonder they are so fat." Then they killed him and cut him to pieces. This was the end of this giant Wendigo. Number 4, the purpose of the legend.
That's pretty messed up, right? Eating his own legs. Yeah, this is why I strongly believe that the Wendigo mythology stems from prions, right? And maybe some innate mental illness as well. People acting crazy.
Whether the native people believe in the Wendigo as a literal creature or merely as a legend depends entirely on the individual's beliefs and who you ask, and it's frankly really not for me to say. There are certainly a significant number of believers who report sightings, but for the purpose of this entry on the list, let's look at the Wendigo from the perspective that it's a folk legend that was created and passed down for a purpose beyond, "Look out, snow monster!" Many scholars believe that the Wendigo was created as a cautionary tale and a deterrent. As any Canadian will tell you, the winters here can be long and brutal. This would result in hunting parties being trapped in storms and there being extreme food shortages. In such extreme survival situations, it would not be uncommon for people in their desperation to consider eating members of their community community in a last-ditch effort to survive. This was considered extremely taboo, obviously, and the prevailing idea was that in these situations it was the proper response to face famine with resignation and a readiness for death. This lends credence to the idea that the legend was created as a deterrent and a cautionary tale to prevent members of the tribe from eating each other during the long, brutal winters, telling them that indulging in the consumption of human flesh would transform them into a hideous and ravenous monster who would be hungry forever. Some have suggested that the Wendigo's appearance is a reference to the harsh elements of the winter, with their emaciation being reminiscent of the hunger winter caused and their tattered and...
I mean, the imagery of the Wendigo varies across different tribes and cultures, but like sometimes it'll be like this like skeletal deer monster thing. Sometimes it'll be just like a gaunt, skinny, bald person. Other times it'll be like a deer man hybrid or moose man hybrid, as the case may be for the one we just saw. So there's a lot of variety, which is kind of tied into how just shapeshifters in folklore are depicted generally. And you can see a parallel with like European werewolves, for instance, where, you know, sometimes it's just a feral looking human. Other times it is a giant wolf, like literally a giant wolf, and then everything in between. So there's a lot of parallels in this folklore and how it correlates to cautionary tales on how to conduct yourself in times of scarcity.
Bloody lips being reminiscent of the enduring ravages of frostbite. If the tribe believed that someone could also be transformed into a Wendigo due to greed, what better way to deter it than to tell the greedy party to shape up so that they could avoid turning into a Wendigo? The taboo against Wendigo-like actions were so strong that during times of famine, tribes such as the Assiniboine, the Cree, and the Ojibwe would reinforce the supposed dangers with a ceremony known as Wendigo Kanzim Owen, where people would wear masks and dance backwards around a drum. Although the Wendigo works well as a deterrent to man-eating, it is also used in a less literal way that is essential to keep in mind to understand the deeper meaning of the legend.
Number 3, the man in my scope. This next story comes to us from an interview that a YouTuber, Funkalopagus, did with a hunter who thinks he had an encounter with the creature or something else deeply strange late at night. He originally posted this story.
Funkalopagus. I love it. My tribe has Algonquin roots. Haven't heard Wendigo stories though. Yeah. Oh yeah, Native Atheist is here. So we got representation.
To Reddit with the name Perpetual Connection, so that's what we'll call him if it comes up. He says he was hunting boar. He was saving up for a while to get a special thermal vision scope. He took it to a range and waited from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. to find a good boar to bag, but surprisingly wasn't finding anything. And he noted that the area that he went up to was shockingly empty of wildlife, no deer, no rabbits, no coyotes, nothing, as opposed to it usually being pretty plentiful. So he was getting himself ready to leave, assuming it must have just been a bad day, when he heard a crunch come from the direction that he'd entered the park. So he raised his scope to see what it was and saw initially what he assumed was a bear, some big mass on his scope. He zoomed in a bit and jolted when he realized it wasn't a bear, but looked a bit more like a man. Now, what was disturbing him was that he was about 30 miles away from any other public areas. And there were no other cars parked around, no wildlife to speak of. The only other living thing next to him was this person in his scope, who happened to be completely naked, twitching and grabbing at all the foliage. The OP then says that the mysterious figure looked up at him and in an extremely unsettling, high-pitched feminine voice began to call out for help. The hunter believed that he was...
Okay, when I go out into the woods and do this stuff, you know, it's not cool for these people to go out and tell everybody on the internet what I'm doing in the woods naked. It's just not cool.
Was being trapped and scrambled to escape. He said it didn't sound like this voice should be coming from this entity. And he said that the creature was staring at him with a wide smile and unfurled itself standing on its back legs, standing 6 feet tall or maybe more. He pointed his weapon at the unknown entity and warned for it to stand down and said that it arched on its fours again and hissed at him like a cat before disappearing into the brush, screeching in wail. The hunter would return to his car.
It was definitely me. Definitely. And I'm not 6 foot. I'm only 5'10". But it can be terrifying.
And drive off in an absolute panic, I think like most of us would, and he would tell authorities what he saw, but he was only reprimanded for hunting at night. I mean, fair enough. If I reported that story to the sheriff or something, I think I as the sheriff would hear that and just, you know, scratch that off, be like, oh, I'm not messing with that. So what do you think? Did he happen to come across someone in the woods who was just having a wild night on all of the substances, or was that a close encounter with death that he narrowly avoided? Number 2, the 2019 sighting. This next sighting happened in 2019. It's the same time as the first point. Coincidence? Absolutely, but worth mentioning nonetheless. This next story was posted to Reddit by a user named Bradley Innovates. Bradley tells about how he had just been discharged honorably, don't worry, from the Marines and was returning home to his home state of Alabama, sweet home Alabama, and was catching up visiting on old friends. His best friend Jacob in particular. The two of them had been friends their whole life and usually got up to, boyhood stuff, hanging out in the woods, that kind of thing. The two of them traveled out to a secluded campsite that they'd enjoyed when they were younger, bringing
Okay, I've never heard Wendigo folklore from Alabama. It's usually like a Canadian or upper Midwest Great Lake area phenomena. Wendigos in the deep south? Yeah. Okay. We need to Arugaroo it.
a long arm with them for target practice. The two were chatting and eventually got onto stories of cryptids in the woods, namely, you guessed it, the Wendigo. His friend told him one could summon this creature by speaking its name 3 times into the woods, like Bloody Mary. I've said its name like 9.
It's like Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice. We just watched Beetlejuice last night, since Byron hadn't seen it yet. So we watched it, but we didn't watch this. We haven't watched the second one, but I'm not a big fan of the second one, honestly. Other than the wedding scene, the musical number for the wedding scene, the second one's just kind of
times in this video. I'm speaking into a camera, so I hope that's okay. I hope I'm not cursing you out there. It might be best just to sage your house a little bit after watching this video. Anyway, Bradley played along and spoke his name out 3 times, only to discover nothing happened, until he heard a snap in the woods, and his reflexes instinctively darted backwards. A few coyotes ran by, and his friend decided that it was enough scares for the woods and started to pack up when a tree began to fall forward towards them. Now, if that wasn't already unnerving, the Redditor said the next thing he heard was the voice of his friend's younger sister calling out to them both, except they didn't bring her along and she wasn't anywhere nearby, and that's when both of them knew they were in far deeper trouble than they thought. They claimed that they saw an emaciated
badass depiction of Wendigo there. Did you see that? Let me see if we can go.
She wasn't anywhere nearby, and that's when both of them knew they were in.
Look at that. That's so cool. It's like all the different forms a Wendigo can take. I like that art piece.
Far deeper trouble than they thought. They claimed that they saw an emaciated, fleshy monster, deathly thin, with next to no meat on its bones, skin as pale as ash, and a vibrant blue eyes. That actually sounds pretty familiar, to be honest. The men fired at it and ran screaming from the woods towards their car. They escaped, horrified by what they saw, but luckily alive. If this story is true, then that has to be a real-life encounter with the creature. Number 1, Jack Fiddler. There truly aren't many sightings or stories of Wendigos, and
we just watched Jack Fiddler a second ago. Well, I guess we're gonna do it again.
Indigenous people don't particularly like to share these stories out of their tribes. Despite the popularity on apps like TikTok, it's a pretty niche bit of folklore. Of course, it could also be because there are people out there maintaining the local population. Jack Fiddler, or Zanhano Gahengogawa, was an Ojibwe shaman living in Sandy Lake in the late 1800s, early 1900s. He was renowned among his people for being a hunter of the supernatural, defending his tribe from threats that no one else would be willing. There are many documented cases of indigenous people who, feeling themselves lose control to the appetite or the spirit within them, would request that someone close and trusted would be the one to finish them off. This could be a close friend of the family or a family member. It was an act of mutual trust. Zanhano Gahengogawa claims to have felled 14 Wendigo.
It's like, to me, it sounds like maybe a death with dignity situation, like I was saying, for someone struggling with severe mental illness, right? But
goes during his lifetime like this. Of course, not everyone would see it this way. By 1906, word would reach the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the Mounties, that to them, there was this is a quote, a band of pagans in the habit of killing one another whenever one gets delirious through fever or other causes. By 1907, the Mounted Police had arrested Zanhano Gahengogawa and his brother Pesquequan for the death of Pesquequan's daughter-in-law. Locals in the tribe decried the decision, saying they didn't understand, and that the man they were accusing of being a killer was a quiet, dignified man who lived with a clear conscience. After 15 weeks of imprisonment, Zanhano Gahengogawa would escape from the police escort holding him. When they found him, he was lying on a rock with a sash tied and a knot around his neck. It was his way out of escaping persecution.
Coming in number 5, we've got the Stalker Challenge. Right on, you might hear that name and think it's one thing, but it's actually probably not the first conclusion your mind lands upon. The Stalker Challenge isn't about following someone around or testing a pal's skills at going unnoticed in the dark. It's actually a reference to a popular PC game called Stalker, where players explore an alternate reality Chernobyl exclusion zone. A lot of folks praise it for its lonesome and isolated atmosphere and the more realistic gunplay. Plenty of online military enthusiasts, survivalists, and Tarkovsky fans enjoy the game. So when we say that this Wendigo sighting harmonica. Like a true survivalist, he hunted some small game, made a meal of it, and explored the surrounding area. Snacking on the rabbit he'd hunted, he heard some rustling coming from the bushes.
How many ad reads do you have in this video, homie?
Think anything of it. The next day, he was startled awake by some screaming. Weird, especially considering how far he was from civilization. Grabbing his rifle, he went off in the direction of the scream. It didn't seem to come from one singular location, and eventually the writer got lost. After a long day wandering around, he found his way back to the camp he'd set up, but now somebody else was there. There was a humanoid form in tattered clothes, staring down at his fire pit, unmoving. Worried that this person might be injured, the writer called out to him. No response. After a few minutes of standing there, staring at him, he again asked if he was all right. The humanoid figure turned to him and said, "I wouldn't worry about it." This set off alarm bells for the writer, who began to back away. At that point, the humanoid mentioned that he could go for another meal right now, prompting the writer to book it out. Hearing the humanoid running behind him, he turned around and shot blindly, apparently
Yay! Staff, congratulations on your 10 months as a cryptic creeper. Steph has been by my side with a lot of the content stuff that I've been doing for about years. We'll just say years. It's been at least 2 years since me and Steph became friends. But the appreciation I have for you and for the work that we do together at the Transpositions cannot be articulated in words. I love you, Steph. Thank you so much for being there for me. My Unfinished Journey, Hail Nero, Hive Science, and Canadian Cryptids. Love ya, 222. Thank you so much. Every little bit helps right now. Again, like I said at the beginning of the show, started a new job here recently, so waiting on my first paycheck, and things are a bit tight right now. So any little bit helps. Appreciate you so much.
Finding his mark. The creature screamed, the same scream from earlier, and seemingly disappeared. The raider eventually made it to the road and encountered a car. He didn't look back. Coming in number 4, we've got the Nebraskan Wendigo. If you weren't already wary of traveling alone in Nebraska, now you've got a whole new reason. That's right, a new spooky story of someone's close encounter with a third kind. Maybe not an alien, but hey, this tale comes...
I mean, Nebraska seems a little bit out of the range, too. It's more in the range than Alabama. What the actual hell, Steph? Oh my god. Oh my gosh, Steph. Oh. I don't know who knows this, but if you watch Transpositions, Steph just got accepted a new job too, so we're both like we're both starting a new job. So when we do Transpositions, just give us some extra love, because we are both just getting off work and hitting the ground running to bring that show to you every Thursday night. Love you so much, Steph.
Comes from a guy who was a farmhand when he was younger. One night, the farmer he worked for asked if he could figure out who was trampling all the corn stalks at night. Excited to take on guard duty, the farmhand stayed up to see if he could catch the culprit. Armed with the farmer's shotgun and the advice not to shoot unless absolutely necessary, he hung out in a lawn chair and walked around the field a few times. Eventually, he heard rustling from within the cornfield, followed by what sounded like giggling children. This, of course, was the most unsettling moment of the farmhand's entire life. Not wanting to hurt kids, but also not wanting to get children of the corn, he brandished his gun and told them to leave unless they were looking for trouble. The giggling stopped, and the rest of the night went smoothly. However, the next morning, the farmer discovered something a little more disturbing than trampled corn. His cow, which had been left in the barn, was totally exsanguinated. All the blood in this animal was removed somehow and didn't leave any on the floors. The farmer called the cops and somehow managed to land on the explanation that it was some idiot kids, but the farmhand didn't quite buy that. However, the following night, both the farmer and the farmhand stayed up to see if they could find anyone. The farmhand, sitting in his chair again, heard the giggling once more. This time he asked whoever it was to reveal himself, prompting a gigantic humanoid creature with antlers to shuffle out of the field. Bad call, to be honest. The farmhand shot at the beast and began to run away. During his flight, he was tripped by a gopher.
Did you really walk across Nebraska, or are you just trolling, John? That's a hell of an achievement if you did. The furthest I've ever walked was about 15 miles, and that will wreck you.
Hole and fell to the ground hard. Suddenly it was morning and the farmhand was back inside the house,
That wrecked me.
surrounded by the farmer's family. The farmer had told the cops that he was attacked by some random guy, but he chased him off. However, afterwards, the farmer took the farmhand aside and told him that he saw the beast too. It was on all.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, I actually really enjoy the new job I'm doing. I won't go into too much details on it here, but I feel like I'm doing good work compared to what I was doing before.
After the boy tripped, and it took 6 shots from his rifle to scare it off. From then on, they didn't go out after dusk, and they kept guns on them at all times around the farm. Coming in at number 3, we've got the frogs. Sometimes a story will draw you down one path and then pull out a twist so devious your spine will stay tingled for weeks.
Frogs? What? What do frogs have to do with Wendigos? I'm so confused now.
This is just such a tale. What do frogs have to do with the Wendigo? Well, just...
Oh my god, he just said the same thing I did. At least I'm not alone.
Sit back and listen, and I'll tell you a tale. This comes from Reddit user Unathana, who has a long history of listening to frogs make noise at night. When they were a kid, their grandmother would reassure them that the croaking was actually good, as it kept the Wendigo away. Over time, they got used to the sounds and actually found them quite soothing. Flash forward many years, and Unathana is enrolled in post-secondary education, taking a course on Native American literature. The Wendigo that they're learning about here is described a little differently than they remember their grandmother talking about. Frogs don't really do all that much to protect against such a creature. A damn shame. They then moved to a new place on the...
So, frogs, they are a good warning system, like when you're, if you're in the woods, like camping or hunting or whatever, at least in the warmer months, the frogs will let you know if something's approaching you, because they will shut that up. Sometimes they'll even jump into the water, or so you'll hear splashes and you'll know something's coming.
on the edge of town within a stone's throw of a pond just packed with frogs. The noise was once again comforting to them, and they tended to keep their windows open to hear them and enjoy the balmy summer heat. However, the night they recounted this story, things were different. Gone was the heat as well as the sound of frogs. In fact, it was unseasonably cold and the night was quieter than ever. This did not bode well for Unathana, not one bit. Every passing second meant more dread, with nowhere to run or hide. The Wendigo was out there somewhere. Better watch out. Coming in number 2, we've got Anansi's Goat Man. One of the best-known Wendigo green text tales. The proliferation of spooky encounter stories on 4chan's paranormal board had a large impact on creepypasta culture in the early 2010s.
Okay, so with the Anasazi, Anasazi just means it's not a Navajo word for ancient enemy, which is the term they used for the pre-Pueblo people. So it's really like it's kind of a slur. It's a Navajo word for the proto-Pueblo cultures. So yes, like and share the stream. We're here every Saturday morning looking at this stuff.
Usually told from a first-person perspective in bullet point form. Well, Anansi's tale starts as a green text, maybe to entice more readers to stick around, but soon becomes a more traditionally written story. It chronicles his trip out to Alabama to visit family and the very strange things that happened while in the rural landscape. He and some cousins went out to a little cabin slash...
Second at time we've had someone claim Wendigos in Alabama. Like, what? I've never... I don't think of Alabama in Wendigos. I think of the South. You got Southern Fried Bigfoots, or as we call them on the Cryptic Corner t-shirts, the Swamp Boogers. And then you think like Rougarou from Louisiana, things like that. Maybe devil monkeys when you get into the Appalachian area, but Wendigos? Or wild men in the Appalachian area too, but Wendigos, I don't really think of Wendigos, Alabama Wendigos. Just because that word, the Wendigo, is like an Ojibwe, sorry if I butchered that there, word. So there weren't a lot of Ojibwe folks in Alabama. I mean, there was a trade network, I suppose, all the way up the Mississippi, especially during the mound builder era, but I digress.
Trailer in the woods and brought some neighbors and other local kids with them. At first, it was just a smell, something like copper or blood that washed over the area. Nobody could explain it, so they tried to ignore it. Then strange figures appeared in the trees, making awful noises. Folks were freaked out, so they ditched the fire and went inside, which resulted in plenty of loud bangs at the door. Understandably, lots of people were scared and wanted to leave, but trekking back through the woods late at night with no weapons, with all this going on, seemed like a bad idea. They decided to stick it out till morning and then leave once whatever rednecks in the woods stopped messing with them. Soon they realized that there were 12 people in the cabin at some point, and now they were just down to 11. Uh-oh. So the next morning, some people left, but Anansi and his buddy Tanner stuck around with a few more folks. The copper smell came and left over and over again, and soon enough, they realized that one of the people they were with was acting weird. She ran off, slack-jawed into the woods, and nobody saw her again. Tanner's cousin showed up later with a gun and claimed to have seen that girl gibbering alone in the woods. He tried to talk to her, but she didn't respond. Weird. On the last night everyone was at the cabin, somebody fired at the figure in the woods, causing it to scream and thrash for hours. During this time, everyone tried to get some sleep in the cabin while Tanner stood guard with the gun. Half asleep, he noticed someone come in from the bathroom and fall asleep on the floor.
Hey, I want this. This is what I want for my home. Altered bust like this. That is a dream of mine. I would rather have a bus, but obviously a cargo van would work. That's my goal. Something where I can travel the country doing this very thing, but actually going on locations. That would be a dream come true for me, to get a van or a bus or something where I can traverse the country hunting monsters, basically. Like Scooby and the gang. Dream come true.
But that put their head count at higher than you remembered. It's a bad sign.
Not really come true, because it's never going to happen, but I can dream.
Just to be safe, he continued to pretend to sleep in the guard chair and noticed that the new addition would convulse and thrash around from time to time. The next morning, everyone left except Tanner, who said he'd lock everything up. Checking the bathroom that the extra body came in from, he noticed the bathroom window was wide open. Whatever this creature was, it was infiltrating their cabin and pretending to be another person the whole time. Horrifying. And finally, at number 1, we've got the gun nut green text. We'll cap off this list with one more green text similar to Anansi's story, but with a different twist. A group of friends from college decided to take a trip out to an uncle's cabin. The stench of blood and copper was just as prevalent here, and over time, the strange event stacked up. The friends heard their own voices off in the woods, calling out for people to come find them. Dead animals were left all over the property, culminating in 2 halves of a deer being thrown at the side of the cabin. Thankfully, these
This is like Skinwalker Ranch sort of stuff. Mobile Hive unit. Yeah, it would be so cool to have like a yellow and purple van. Like that's Life from the Hive themed, right? And I travel around, go into different locations. Obviously, I'd have to stay mostly in the U.S. or once I get my passport, I'll be able to go to Canada and Mexico and stuff too. But just to travel around hunting down folklore and doing like on location videos about it would be just an amazing dream come true for me. It's something to do with my life.
Pals were all a bunch of gun nuts with experience making homemade thermite, and when the going got bad, they got to work. Preparing to leave the cabin in the middle of the night, they had different roles for dealing with their Wendigo assailant. Some took point with rifles, while others...
Why do they keep waiting until night to... Oh, there goes my earbud. Why do they keep waiting until night to make their break? They've described this as a multi-day event. Why didn't they just bounce during the day?
Their things.
Especially if people are disappearing and transforming and such, and they're shooting monsters in the woods.
But at the last moment, after one pal went running off into the woods to see what he could find, they noticed something odd. A figure looking like their friend who had just run off was in the back of the cabin, appearing extra disheveled, pretending to pack up with the rest of them. This was their sign to open fire and toss one of their homebrew thermite grenades after it. Even then, they can't be sure that they actually put an end to whatever shape-shifting creature was stalking them. The cabin ended up as ash, though, so they're not planning on visiting anytime soon. Coming in at number 5, we've got a Nevadan escapade. This story comes from a self-proclaimed survivalist living in Nevada. They open up the tale with a bit of a disclaimer, saying that they never really believed in the paranormal before this happened. In fact...
No, so the Rocky Mountains are also a bit out of the normal range for a Wendigo. It's actually funny because there's an episode of Supernatural, the show with the Winchesters, and they go and hunt monsters and stuff. That there's a Rocky Mountain Wendigo, and they mention that it's like sort of out of range for what normally is considered the home range or the homeland of the Wendigo.
Prior to experiencing this, they would have assumed that anything strange going on would likely be the result of government experiments and the like. There was absolutely no way they expected an experience like the one I'm about to summarize. So the survivalist had a couple weeks of vacation saved up and didn't want to let it roll over to the next year. Taking that time off, he didn't really know what to do with himself. After a day of doing nothing, he decided to go camping on his own, as none of his friends were able to take any time off. Away he went, packing some basic supplies and grabbing coffee and donuts on the way out. After setting up camp in the middle of nowhere, the survivalist decided to have a little...
What if you want to go to Vegas, John? That's a reason to go to Nevada.
vodka and do some target shooting. Following an encounter with a jackrabbit, he came across a freshly killed coyote. Seeing as hunting coyotes is relatively common practice in Nevada, he didn't think much of it, but he still saw the way the body was left as strange. Weird smell, too. That evening, while scanning through some capped channels on his ham radio, the survivalist came across something odd. Knowing that there was military presence in the area, he wasn't too surprised to hear the sounds of gunfire coming through the speaker. However, these wargame sounds were followed up by what he described as nails on a chalkboard and a blood-curdling scream. Immediately after hearing these noises, the radio crapped out. Uh-oh. Reassuring himself that whatever happened there was hundreds...
I've been to Vegas, too, but when I went to Vegas, we didn't even... well, we did stop there. We did stay there at night, but we stayed in like a dive, not a dive, but like a cheap hotel. And we didn't really casino or anything because we had the kids with us.
Hundreds of miles away, he went to bed. The next day, while puttering about, he wandered into a fenced-off military area, letting him know that whatever those noises...
And Death Valley was cool too. We camped, and we camped in Lake Mojave, which is not too far from Vegas. And yeah, we went through Death Valley. It was 118 degrees when we went through Death Valley. Good morning, Scott.
Where last night, they were probably closer than he assumed. Exploring this area more, he came across a cave that piqued his interest. Heading inside, he didn't notice anything odd at first, but soon became attuned to a very particular rotting smell. The same smell he noticed when coming across the oddly killed coyote. This tipped something off in his head, and he got the hell out of there. At that point, the survivalist was terrified.
Ooh, that's a pretty cave.
Returning to his camp, he found that it had been raided. Everything was torn up, tossed about, and emptied, and nothing was missing though. While checking on his equipment, he noticed that all of these sounds in the area had stopped, dead quiet as night fell. And that's when he saw it. A humanoid creature standing off to the side, looking straight at him with dark voids for eyes. Hell, it even looked like it cracked a little smile. The survivalist tried to shoot
It
it,
didn't have antlers though.
but his bullets didn't seem to do anything but piss it off, making it scream in an ungodly fashion. Seeing that his weapon wasn't doing much, he booked it out of there and found a crevice to hide out in until sunrise. And when the sun rose, he got the hell out of there, ASAP. Coming in at number 4, we've got the...
So why is this not Bigfoot folklore instead of Wendigo folklore? It's more of a Bigfoot type range, right? In behavior, and nothing about this says that it couldn't have been a Sasquatch. Not that I think that there's actual Sasquatch, but I digress.
Forest Ranger. Being a forest ranger must be fascinating, right? Out in the wilderness all day, every day, minimal human contact, keeping an eye on the local flora and fauna, occasionally taking part in rescues, maybe helping a lost hiker find their way, wearing a cool hat. What a life. Of course, it isn't all fun and games. There are plenty of harrowing...
I think I do need a smoky hat. I would love to do some park ranger cosplay.
situations one can find themselves in when deep in the forest. However, mythical monsters don't usually come up during job training, so you better watch out. Take this tale from a forest ranger somewhere in the States. While responding to a missing persons report, they found themselves in a tricky area of the hiking trail. At some point it splits, with one of the paths leading people deeper into the forest instead of back to the service area. Naturally, the ranger called for some backup, and about a half hour later his backup showed up. Ranger and backup head off into the woods, calling out for the missing person, but to no avail. And when they got to the split in the path, Mr. Backup disappeared too. Trying for a while to contact the missing backup on their walkie, the ranger got a little spooked. Then, when all hope seemed to be lost, he ran into someone matching the description of the original missing person. However, this individual didn't respond to anything the ranger said to them. The ranger took the person back to their truck and told them to wait
The person was 9 foot tall.
in the back while he went to look for his backup again. At this point, his backup chimed in on the walkie, saying that he'd found the missing hiker at the bottom of a hill with a broken leg and would be returning with him soon, which didn't line up with what he had seen. The ranger went back to the truck and saw that it was empty, with the passenger door wide open and the cage inside bent out of shape. Apparently that kind of stuff had been happening for a while too. Folks hearing their neighbors calling out in the night when they knew their neighbors were on vacation, or perhaps hearing their dog barking outside when the dog was at the foot of their bed. Coming in at number 3, we've got Pet Sematary. If you've only seen the movies based on this Stephen King tale, you might be a little confused. The feature films tend to skim over the folklore at the core of this resurrectory story. Sure, the ground is sour.
If you read the book, you get a lot of the Micmac folklore that's associated with the burial ground in Pet Sematary. So, I mean, do with it what you will. Stephen King's interpretation of Micmac folklore is loose, but it's fun, I guess. It does, but Stephen King does toe the line of like cultural stuff sometimes of problematic, but I think that what Chris was talking about this earlier on Sci-Fi Saturday. It's a product at the time too. It's difficult to represent a people without making a caricature of that people in fiction, especially when that people is largely no longer living the lifestyle that you are referencing, right? Like they've westernized themselves. Am I all blurry? Hold on. Switch this over. There we go. That should fix it. So, I mean, so take with it what you will. By the 1980s, when King was writing Pet Sematary, there was a push to stop mythologizing. Mythologizing? Is that the right word? There was a push to stop doing that with Native American culture. Basically, it was a push for dignity. But before that, you had Popeye and Big Chief Ugga Wug Wug and all that nonsense. You had Italian spaghetti Western Native Americans. Yeah.
Word and stuff comes back to life, but why? Well, if you crack open a spicy little paperback, you'll find out exactly what happens. The spirit of a Wendigo plays a big part. The Creeds move into a lovely home near Ludlow and immediately run into trouble. The kids are getting hurt and the cat is killed by a passing vehicle. And soon enough, they learn about the Micmac burial ground near their residence. Apparently, it was abandoned because the ground was sour. Soon, they learn some tales detailing the Wendigo that lived around there. It would walk through villages late at night, and anyone touched by it would develop a taste for human flesh. Eventually, it touched the burial ground.
Yeah, the Micmac were near your stomping ground, Steph. The Micmac are your people. Or not your people, but like your neighbors.
Self-souring it and causing anything buried there to be possessed by it. This Wendigo spirit seems to orchestrate all sorts of terrible events in the story, playing with the emotions of the people around the Creed house. Some say that the Wendigo even manipulates the grief of everyone in the tale, causing them to act against their better judgment. Through this, it can possess more people and cause more terror. The horror of the Wendigo runs deeper than just the hunger for flesh and physical strength. Coming in at number 2, we've got Wendigo psychosis. There is some debate as to whether this disorder is real or not. If you look to the origins of the Wendigo legend, you can find plenty of association with the depths of winter without readily available.
And it just seems so much like lycanthropy that it's hard to not draw that correlation, right? Am I right? I mean, call me out if I'm saying something wrong, but it seems like Wendigo sickness and lycanthropy among European populations may be expressions of the same disorder in the human mind.
Food, often First Nations people would be subjected to famine. One who would indulge in the taboo of human flesh was considered to be possessed by an evil spirit, one that would never be satisfied. It makes sense, right? The idea of a cautionary tale.
Brian Stevens says, cultural things and stereotypes must by nature go hand in hand. The difference is accurate context. Yeah, it's the difference between historical and mythological, right? Of who these people are. Because there's, the Manifest Destiny depiction of Native American peoples is very different from what these cultures were really like. first of all, they were often depicted as just a vague conglomeration. Like there was no, like, in fiction, there was, they were just engines. There wasn't, they didn't have to worry about like which folklore belonged to which people. They just do a conglomeration to depict this. And this was, from colonial days all the way up through maybe into the 90s. But like, I keep picturing Apache Chief in my head from the cartoons who had the ability to grow.
Involving a slippery slope existing everywhere. One slip up and you can descend into the depths of depravity. This seemed to be where the Wendigo legend originates, and since then the Wendigo name has been used to denote a mental illness. Wendigo psychosis is said to be the uncontrollable craving for human flesh, even if other options are available. Often reported in the northeastern American tribes, it started to die out once folks began to study and write about it. This caused a lot of folks to become skeptical, but the idea lived on. Plenty of tales concerning this sudden cannibalism have turned up over the years, and whether an actual Wendigo spirit has possessed these individuals or if they're just experiencing a psychotic break is hard to say. There's an account from some Jesuit missionaries traveling through New France.
I was that way reading It. Stephen King's It is one of my favorite books. Obviously, my favorite book is The Silmarillion, but it's on the list in the top 5. I've read it about 6 times, and that's saying a lot because it's like over, I think it's 1,300 pages. So, commitment to enjoying the narrative. I did read parts of the Dark Tower series. It did not speak to me quite as much. But I do like the Dark Tower series, and it's kind of it's almost like a multiverse of madness of the Kingverse.
Back in the 19th century, where they came across some men with the mysterious psychosis. Keep in mind, these missionaries were likely deliberately painting any First Nations peoples as savages in need of religion, so maybe take this with a grain of salt. They claimed in their report that they met men so ravenous for human flesh that they pounced upon women, children, and even upon men like veritable werewolves, and devoured them voraciously without being able to appease or glut their appetite, ever seeking fresh prey and the more
It's weird to call Italians tomato eaters when tomatoes are a New World crop from the Americas, and they did not have tomatoes in Italy until the 16th century. So, yeah, they didn't have, and the other Italian thing, pasta, it's not Italian either. It comes from China. Italians appropriating, I guess. Garlic, maybe they can have garlic. Garlic can be Italian origin, but yeah, tomatoes are American, and noodles, pasta is Chinese, or I guess I should say Chinese. Cathay, because at that time it wasn't like China wasn't like a cohesive nation. It was there are parts of China now that weren't parts of China then, I guess is the best way to put it, because by that time China had unified to some extent, but China's still growing. Of course, you got Tibet and Hong Kong and things like that that come into play.
greedily the more they eat. I mean, that does sound like a Wendigo, doesn't it? And coming in at number 1, you've got Swift Runner. This is a man who claimed to have been possessed by a Wendigo. It seems that he was generally well liked in his community. A Cree man, he was a tour guide that assisted visitors. In the late 1870s,
yes. Yeah, Jer, thank you for promoting that. I saw that on the documentary Prime suggestions. There's a documentary on Amazon Prime called Real Engine about the portrayal of indigenous people in cinema. It's on my list, but I haven't watched it yet. I haven't watched it yet either. Not my people, but neighbors to the north. The Passamaquoddy and the Penobscot lands are closer to my location. All parts of the Wabanaki Confederation. I can't believe I said all those names right, and I will not take critique saying I said them wrong, because I know I said them right.
He and his family moved into the woods. Unseen from the winter of 1878 until the spring of 79, the man came back and claimed that his family succumbed to starvation during the harsh winter. He did not look worse for wear, though. Suspicious of the supposedly starving man, folks went to find his campsite, and when they got there, they were horrified to discover human bones, picked clean and hollowed out. There was even a skull with a shoe in it. After this, Swift Runner admitted to cannibalizing his family. Didn't appear to be totally necessary either. There were posts nearby that they could have used to get supplies, and the option to return to community was still on the table. The answer to whether a Wendigo spirit had actually overtaken him died with him, though, as he was hanged for his transgressions. Cannibalism is scary enough on its own, but the idea of a Wendigo makes it that much worse.
Number 5, some strange noises. One of the creature's signature calling cards is said to be its horrific wails, its pain shrieks that don't sound like any animal you'd recognize. It's also said that it's been able to imitate human voices to better lure out its prey. And perhaps those disconcerting sounds were caught on tape as recently as 2019, when a series of howls and shrieks left a hunter and a government biologist searching for answers as to what was going on in those woods. Gino Mikas was hunting with his wife and grandson in northwest Ontario.
Ooh, are we actually going to hear it? I was about to wrap up, but if we're going to hear this, I'll stick around for a minute.
Fairly remote rural area, about 50 kilometers away from the nearest sign of civilization, most likely an en route. Sorry for the rest of the world, that joke is just for Ontario. It's a Canadian cryptid, what can I say? At first, I thought it was a moose, but my mind changed when it screamed again and again. Mikas is an avid hunter, a resident of Sioux Lookout, and knows his way around the woods and what creatures should be living in it. He added on,
does he know what an elk bugle sounds like?
saying, I've heard many different animals in the wild, but nothing like this. I grew up hunting with my grandfather for the first 12 years of my life. The howls initially came from the distance, but soon appeared closer. We've got the clip, so why don't you take a listen for yourself and see what you think. Now, some speculated that it could be a grizzly bear. However, there's not
It sounds like a bear.
a lot of evidence for that, since grizzlies don't really live in these surrounding areas. They are known to roam, but there's not reports of grizzly bears nearby. Others speculated that it could be a wolf, which definitely is possible, but you would think that
It does not sound like a wolf. Sounds like a bear. But it doesn't have to be a grizzly bear. It could be a black bear. Black bears, I don't know what people just like, oh, black bears are smaller, so they're not going to sound as deep and intimidating. Black bears can reach like 600 pounds, and they're massive predatory animals. Yes, they can growl and sound scary. They can roar. A black bear can roar. Make no mistake about it.
an expert seasoned hunter would recognize a wolf. So there's a number of people who speculate that this could be the mythical Wendigo caught on tape. And if you're looking for way more stories of folklore, creatures, cryptids, well, you already know what channel I'm going to recommend. It's the one you're watching right now.
All right, we're gonna wrap up here. We're at 36 minutes into a 52-minute video, but we're well into the Wendigo folklore, and we're just gonna. There's gonna be a lot of repeats for moving forward. John Fiddler and Swift Runner and things like that. So, yeah, to revisit, this was top 5 scary videos elite. And they're like putting stuff out just today. Haunted churches where Satan himself lurks. Ed and Lorraine Warren. Oh my gosh. We'll have to dig into them sometime. Underrated horror movies that will give you nightmares. That doesn't have anything to do with creatures and cryptids, but this was a new video. This was just came out 2 days ago, so that's why I picked it. So it's fairly new. I know it's made up of shorter videos pasted together, so that's why we're kind of able to stop right here because they repeat a lot of the topics. But yeah, so I mean, if you're into this kind of stuff, let me know, and we'll have to revisit this channel again. All their content is like super long though. Like everything's over an hour, which is not great for CrypticCorner. And I'm wondering if when we get further back, if they have shorter ones. But this is like they're putting out tons of content, but it seems like it's mostly stitched together versions of other people's work. So grain of salt, as they say. But what do you guys think about the Wendigo? What do you believe is the Wendigo same as the mental disorder known as lycanthropy from European folklore and history, I guess, and court history, even medical history? Is the Wendigo a bear, like what I think a lot of the Sasquatch stuff is? When it comes to running into people in the woods, is it some nature child that people just don't understand, or is it just racism to paint native people as savage cannibals, as we've seen time and time again from the history of colonization of both the Americas and the South Pacific? So this type of presentation is not unique to the Wendigo, but the Wendigo itself as a cultural folklore of the people seems to be in my opinion, a way for that population to deal with mental illness that pops up in those long, cold winter months, right? with the cabin fever. And I've had cabin fever before. When I was about 19, me and my then partner lived in a very, very far out in the wilderness cabin house, right? And like miles from the closest neighbor, and about 18 miles from town. Or no, it would have been more like 10 miles from town. But regardless, we got cabin fever one winter because we'd get snowed in for weeks. And eventually we put on our snow gear and freaking walked to town. And because the roads were closed, you couldn't get there. We walked to town. No, is the Wendigo just misspelling of indigo? Well, there's a couple of ways that Wendigo is spelled too. The way you spelled it right there is right as well, but also the W-E-N-D it works as well. But let me know in the comments down below how you feel about the Wendigo and what you think the Wendigo could be, and how you think the folklore unfolded about this animal. And until next time, please remember to be kind, take care, and we'll see you again.